bitten wir Blair und Andrew auf die Bühne, beziehungsweise zu uns, auf der Bühne sind sie schon. Wir haben die beiden kennengelernt, als wir mit Heike unterwegs waren und Jens, der hier auch irgendwo ist, da hinten, genau, Mann von Heike. Wir haben eine Tour durch Vermont gemacht im Jahr, weiß ich nicht mehr, vor Corona jedenfalls. Vor Corona und haben unter anderem die beiden kennengelernt mit ihrer wirklich einmaligen Holzofenbäckerei, würde ich sagen.
Ja, sehr beeindruckend.
Sehr beeindruckend. Auch ein Frauenteam in der Backstube, 2 Frauen, die da die ganze Zeit backen und Andrew als Mühlenbauer noch gleich nebendran. Beeindruckend zu sehen, aber den Rest erzählen Sie, glaube ich, lieber selber.
Ja. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Unlike Sarah, who's recovered from her jet lag, I have absolutely not. So, but also, like Sarah, we're very, very excited to be here and for this opportunity to connect and hear about what's going on in this area and to explore and have these really inspiring conversations that we've had today and are looking forward to for tomorrow. But anyway, I guess I'll start by introducing ourselves. My name is Blair Marvin. This is my husband, Andrew Heyn, and we own a bakery in northern Vermont in the United States. We've baked wood breads, sourdough breads in our wood-fired oven for nearly 2 decades together until just fairly recently, where we've taken on some other projects, which you'll hear about in a little while. But essentially, I'll give you a little bit short little background about the bakery, wood-fired sourdough bakery. I bake about between 1,200 and 1,400 loaves of bread a week. So we've really worked hard to kind of have a small bakery that allows us to have a sustainable business for ourselves and for our family. Our main focus beyond sourdough and wood-fired baking is that we use 100% organic cereal grains sourced directly from farmers within our state of Vermont. And we've worked really hard for the last 7 years to build these connections with our local farmers and to bridge a gap in our food system and local agricultural system in Vermont that has existed. Yeah.
So, is this? Yep. So we came to the bakery in a funny way. Both Blair and I were trained as chefs, and we worked in restaurants for several years. And Blair was working in a small cafe and buying bread from a local person who was baking more or less as a hobby. This was that oven, and he said one day, "Hey, do you know anybody who would like to buy a house and a bakery and some land?" And we hadn't really thought of becoming bakers. We were chefs, but we're looking to try something different.
And like Sarah said, that the entrepreneurial spirit in the United States is very, very strong. And in this spirit, we were very inspired by this gentleman named Alan Scott from Tasmania, who created this model of wood-fired bread ovens, like these 4x6 bread ovens that you could build yourself and kind of build up the model of a community baker. And as we were doing this, and this is almost 20 years ago, and at that point there wasn't the community that there is now of bread bakers and the way to connect that there is now, like via Instagram. The way that we learned and inspired each other was by connecting with other bakers and by visiting other bakers, and in return having them come and visit us. So wood-fired baking in the United States is not terribly common. So we very quickly banded together and formed this really, really strong community. And what happens whenever you build a strong community and you're collaborating and you're talking, you eventually start sharing ideas and you start sharing inspiration.
So with that first oven, and learning from other wood-fired bakers that we met and hosted and visited, I had a lot of ideas on how to improve on that oven. And one day we were baking and heard a loud poof, and a big piece of the bottom of the oven fell out. And so we had to decide, do we keep wood-fired baking or do we give up? Well, we decided to work with a mason and design a newer version of the wood-fired oven. And this is that next generation. One of the things we included with this design was the ability to use a loader So instead of having to load all of the bread with a peel, we could use a mechanical loader like this so that we could load a full row of bread at once.
Yeah, and so what that kind of did, and through the process of examining the way we baked bread and the way we approached our oven, was from baking in the Alan Scott oven, we kind of developed this like inquisitive perspective about what we do, like, and really trying to dive deeper into our process and to what that looks like. And so our first deep dive was into wood-fired baking and how to improve on the oven we did to be able to produce breads that we were very happy with. That being said, at the time, whenever we were doing this, we were buying pallets of white organic flour from a mill across our northern border up in Canada. And it's a very amazing mill. It's a roller mill. It's family owned. It's great, but it's still large scale flour coming from outside of our country. It was showing up in our bakery on pallets from a truck, and we were mostly making white breads, still respecting the tradition that we had based our business on of, long, cold fermentation, slow fermentation, using sourdough, wood-fired baking, but we were still baking bread with white flour. Right around that same time, whenever we were kind of at this period of time, our son, Phineas, was just starting to eat bread. And like literally all he wanted to eat was baguettes. And we couldn't get him to eat anything else. And like any new parents, we wanted to give our son the most healthy and nutritious food we possibly could. And so we were also kind of at this period in our growth as bakers where we were ready to change things up. We had built and designed this new oven. We had really taken a deep dive into wood-fired mechanics and like how to produce the bread we wanted. The next step, and it just dawned on us because of our son, was that we needed to be inspired again. We needed to kind of think about what our process was and expand and grow. But instead of growing in the traditional sense of bigger, better, faster, stronger, make more bread, expand to new markets, we decided to focus in on our primary ingredient, which was the wheat and the grain.
At the time in Vermont, it had become very popular to source your food locally. So people cared about where their vegetables came from in their CSA. They cared about where their cheeses were coming from and their meats and their dairy.
Their hops and their beer, yeah.
But grain was never really talked about. And so that got us to thinking, like, are there farmers growing grain in Vermont, and can we connect with them to source grain from Vermont as well? We met this couple from a farmer's market, the Rogers family, and they had a dairy farm, and to diversify, instead of just milking cows, they decided to grow some grain along with it. This variety here was called Redeemer that they grew. And we got to talking to them, and we said, hey, we have a bakery, and we're looking for local grain. And they say, well, we have some local grain, but we don't have a bakery. We also don't have a mill. So there was no regional mill in Vermont that was doing stone milling. So I got the idea after talking to another wood-fired baker friend that instead of trying to buy a stone mill, I would build my own stone mill.
And this goes back to that point of community that we were talking about in the bread community, is that through these connections and conversations with other bakers to learn what people are looking at and what they're looking for in their bread and how to make more flavorful and nutritious bread came from these conversations.
Mm-hmm. And so I was able to purchase some stones from a place down in North Carolina. There was one other company that was building stone mills, but they were building more of like a more industrial farm type piece of equipment and not really a mill for bakers. So we got some stones and figured out how to build our first mill. And this was the first iteration of it. It took us about a year between building the mill and figuring out how to make it work, but then also how to change all of our breads. We had been baking with one type of flour and using fresh flour, which had so much more aroma and so much more activity and sensitivity that we had to really do our same breads but tweak them a little bit. Blair was I don't know, Blair, you can talk more about that. So we originally thought, okay, we'll mill a little bit of flour and blend it in, and it was sort of working. And then one day we were going to the bench and going to shape, and Blair said, something is different here. And I said, we just had to go all the way. So we mixed all of the dough with fresh flour, and it turned out, and the feedback was good.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that even though we took this really quick, kind of scary deep dive into using 100% fresh milled flour, the idea and the purpose behind it was that we realized that if we were going to make bread the way that we really wanted to, and to be able to take this deep dive as bakers, we wanted to be able to completely support these farmers that we were building relationships with. And it was really important to us, as far as a system goes, to be able to, to support them in every way we can. And for us, the way we saw that was to use all local flour. And like Andrew mentioned, there wasn't a regional mill in our area at the time. There wasn't a way to be able to get this local flour from these amazing farmers into our bread and to the customers. And we wanted to be able to do that. So we went down this path of designing and building our own mill. But as a result, we were able to build these lasting relationships and be able to support each other and tell the stories of the farmers to our customers, and kind of trying to connect, repair a disconnect that people had between where their grain came from and where their bread was coming from, and what was in their bread, and tell that story. And it's been a really, really incredible process because of the success of it, and being able to say to our customers, every single speck of flour is coming from somebody within your region, and to use that.
Mm-hmm. And this, they have this expression on their face because our friend Nate asked Blair to come and drive the combine. So she had just driven the combine to harvest our own grain, which was pretty neat.
And as a baker, nearly 2 decades in, the last thing I ever expected was, I expected my work to be done on the bench, shaping the dough, mixing the dough, but never did I expect that in the United States, in our food system, in our business, that it would take me to a place where I was able to sit and have the farmer call me and say, hey, it's go time. The fields are ready. Please come up here. Can you be here in an hour? I'd like you to sit on the combine and come with us. And so being able to forge these relationships has been absolutely critical in seeing this disconnect being repaired.
Mm-hmm. And so over these last several years, after working with that first farmer, we've encouraged more farmers in Vermont to grow grain and make it available to bakers. This is a new one that we started working with a couple of years ago. They're transitioning a dairy farm to growing more grain that was conventional and moving towards organic. And this is another farm where we also helped out.
Yeah, and so now in the small state of Vermont, I would say the vast majority of the bakeries are using either 100% local organic grains that are directly sourced from the farmers, or they're using a percentage and trying to take that small percentage and increase it, because everybody sees the importance of supporting our local agricultural system and kind of creating stacked enterprises and diversity on the farms to be able to make them more sustainable. Vermont and so much of the United States and so many places are agricultural states, and for us to be able to figure out how to support that in every way we can is absolutely vital.
Mm-hmm. The picture of one of the breads we've been making with local grain here. So as we developed this idea of milling all of our grain, we had these points where we sort of snuck the grain into our breads. We didn't make a big deal about it, but people came up to us in the stores where we delivered, and they said, "There's something special about your bread. It's more wheaty. It tastes more like wheat." And we said, "Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it taste like the grain and from where it comes from." So we changed our packaging to add this statement to the back of all of our breads to kind of explain what our reasons were for doing the extra work of stone milling.
Yeah, and the idea behind this when we're talking about flavor is, as we mentioned, respecting the traditions of wood-fired baking and sourdough baking, but instead of using the idea was instead of was using fermentation and the methods of sourdough and transitioning that to the grains to be able to enhance and showcase to our customers and the inherent aromas and flavors that are naturally present in all of the grains, to be able to really show the diversity that can be had with all of these grains. Because with fresh flour, the aroma, the flavor, it's extraordinary. Yes.
So all of these baker friends we had made over the years started to come back and visit and say, we want to know about your stone mill. Are you going to ever do another one? This is one baker friend that we made, Jonathan Bethany. He has a bakery in Washington, D.C. called Selu, and he's one of the top whole grain bakers that we know in the U.S. And he said, I'm doing this bakery. I need a mill. So would you be interested in building more mills? So I had to figure out how to do it again. So this is the quarry in Vermont where this particular granite comes from.
It's 30 minutes from where the bakery is and from where we mill. There's a granite history of granite and stone cutting in Vermont, and we were very lucky that we were able to source this berry gray granite that's excellent for millstones.
Yeah, and these were some of the first stones that we had cut from them. And I had to go about figuring out how to build a business manufacturing these. This was in 2015. I built 2, and then I built the next year 4, and then 10, and now we've built about 200 mills.
And this is the modern mill that we have now. But the really extraordinary thing about this, and what makes us so lucky in the evolution of this, is that we get to see this insight through the mills and form these relationships with the farmers and the millers and the bakers around the United States, and be able to gain a little look through the window of the mills to see what's happening in communities across the country, and to be able to know that if there's a mill, typically, whether it's a small scale artisan mill, or a regional mill, or a farm that has a mill, or a baker that is milling, typically you're going to find that there is a farmer that they are collaborating with, and that the baker is going the extra length to be able to build these relationships and to focus in on their primary ingredient and to try and make and bring better bread to their communities. And so we feel really lucky to be able to see this small-scale milling and relationship kind of be coming back together, and seeing the enthusiasm for local grains, organic grains, and telling the story of the grains and re-educating people in where there's this gap in our food vernacular in the United States.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay here.
Ja, wir haben diese Lücke, the gap, zwischen allen, die beteiligt sind am guten Brot, auch am eigenen Leib erfahren in Hamburg, in Norddeutschland. Es gibt keine kleinen Mühlen mehr, zumindest keine biologisch arbeitenden Mühlen, die Biogetreide verarbeiten. Und wir sind jetzt auch auf diesem Weg, irgendeine kleine Mühle zu finden oder aktuell selber zu mahlen mit einer eigenen Mühle. Genau. Es ist also nicht nur in den USA so, es ist auch im Brotland Deutschland so mittlerweile.
Ja.